How might your life have been different if there was a religion for you? A religion that honored you as a woman, as made equal in the image of God. Welcome to Heretica, her eco-feminist theology podcast. My name is Elena and I am an eco-feminist theologian. Please subscribe at theologyofher.substack.com. How the sexual energy unites us with God, Part 1. The sexual, reproductive energy is also our creative energy, a primordial spiritual energy which is not only to be understood as a source of intimate pleasure or used only for reproductive purposes, but also the source energy of creation, of the universe and all life forms. It's the energy through which we expand our consciousness and go through a spiritual rebirth to experience union with God, known as liberation or enlightenment. This primordial energy is said to be stored at the base of the spine, known popularly due to the spread of yoga in mainstream culture as Kundalini Shakti, feminine in nature which gradually awakens, spiraling up through the spinal column until it transcends physical existence. The awakening occurs not only by entering altered states of consciousness and elevating ourselves through these experiences, but also through good intentions aligned with the goodness of God's creation, which is an ecstatic experience. It requires, in short, a combination of good intentions as a holistic practice in all areas of our lives. So the sexual spiritual energy goes through an alchemical process when we consciously cultivate its ecstatic potentials, which are inherent in sexuality as a means of self-realization. For many, this experience can be a process for spiritual or transpersonal development, but my sole interest in this podcast is enlightenment, the ultimate goal being seeing a vision of the divine as Mary Magdalene did, being the first disciple to see a vision of Christ, as stated in her Gospel, deeming her the apostle of all apostles. So, when we nurture the spiritual, emotional, and transformational capacities of sexuality as a spiritual discipline, we are able to reach higher states of awareness and have direct experiences of God or the Goddess. This is a sexual awakening, which is life-giving. As stated in the paper, when eros is God, cultivating the ecstatic potentials of sexuality as transpersonal development, the experience of sexual transcendence creates a transpersonal connection with a force or presence beyond the self and a dissolving of boundaries of the self. Such sexual experiences also have a shadow side that can be a source of pain. The sense of connection creates a shift and reorientation in sexual and spiritual values and understanding. This is an important point, that through sexual transcendence, we enter a process of purification and self-transformation that can be very challenging, as this can begin to change who we thought we were in all aspects of life, such as personal, social, professional, is not that anymore. And this change can be confronting. But so can the cognitive dissonance that gets created because of this change. You need to be patient and compassionate towards yourself during such a time, as this new relationship to sexual potential is transformative, leading to wholeness and healing, which are great outcomes. When it comes to healing, this can be in regards to a disconnection from God, and you want that reconnection. Mostly for women, healing from the disconnection can come from being considered the inferior human. Hence, this reconnection and the visceral understanding and experience of being created equal in the image of God from the beginning can be healing cognitively, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. This is one healing that can occur on this journey, and we should not undermine its positive effects. It can be powerful to embody this reality truly. Perhaps it can also contribute to meaning-making, which is also a life-giving attribute. The classic features of common transcendent experiences include an expansion of boundaries of the self, a feeling of surrender and letting go, a quality of ineffability, a sense of awe and overwhelming power, out-of-body experiences, a feeling of connection or sense of oneness, new insights and viewpoints, and being beyond space and time. Evelyn Underhill, the most widely read writer on prayer, contemplation, spirituality, worship and mysticism in the first half of the 20th century, best known for her spiritual book entitled Mysticism, a Study in the Nature and Development of Man's Spiritual Consciousness, describes the psychological features of ecstasy and rapture as a withdrawal of consciousness from peripheral concerns and its refocusing towards the center of existence, which is rewarded in healthy cases by an enormous lucidity, a supreme intention in regard to the one thing on which the self's interest has been set. Of all the subjective religious experiences, this ecstatic form of contemplation may be the most universal. In the context of religious cosmology, transcendence is characterized as reflecting mystical states of consciousness. These feelings of intense union with God or the ground of all being may arise unbidden or as the result of deliberate practice such as prayer, contemplation, or meditation. So we can see how transcendence and its features are universal experiences that we can all have, which confirms that this human potential of spiritual awakening and ecstatic raptures for union with God or the Goddess exists in everyone's sexual awakening. Yet when and how will be unique. The way I understand why this uniqueness exists for every one of us is a result of what we bring in from previous lifetimes, as I believe in reincarnation. So our karmas and samskaras, which in Indian philosophy, samskaras are the subtle impressions of our past actions in this and in previous lifetimes. So they are mental impressions, recollections, or psychological imprints. These impressions exist in our psyche, which is actually the subconscious mind. It's not the brain, it's a consciousness, the subconscious. The subconscious is the store of all the memories and associations that you hold lifelong. They are all there, everything. While there are many good features in our psyche, there are many challenges, and ecstatic states can also have a disruptive influence on psychological stability, because they bring to the forefront our samskaras, and we need to purify them until we experience pure emotions, pure consciousness. Ecstatic experiences are described as a burst in sudden eruption up from the depths of the soul with spasms and convulsions, or lead to the strongest excitements, to intoxicated frenzy, to ecstasy. This psychological instability re-emphasizes the fact that such experiences change life as we knew it, like it can become a challenge to keep up socially with the outside world as you begin to experience small deaths of the ego. You may need to spend time alone to handle this psychological instability. And from always wanting to get something out of a situation, you become selfless, which for some may be a challenge. Back now to the sexual energy as a spiritual force. There are 3 paradigms of or ways of relating to eros. The first is representative of conventional approaches to sexuality, where orgasm is the goal. The second is Neo-Tantra, which is a ritual approach in which orgasm is withheld in order to reach higher states of transcendence. The third paradigm is celibate brahmacharya, a Sanskrit term that refers to the practice of refraining from sexual intercourse so that consciousness is free to go beyond or transcend orgasm. In reality, the journey, unless you are a renunciate from a physical perspective, spiritual celibacy will be your path. But for the rest of us, it's probably a combination of all 3, with one being more dominant than the other. And that, of course, can be celibacy. This is not a path exclusive to monks or nuns. It can be the path of those living in the ordinary world as well. The way eros manifests in intra- and interpersonal relationships, as mentioned, is unique to all of us. Hence, our erotic nature cannot be limited to a single mode of expression, and its essential nature is mystery. We will now look at 3 studies and see the comparison between them, for the first 2 being orgasm as the goal and Neo-Tantra. The first one was a study with 63 non-religious subjects evenly divided between males and females. Respondents were asked to describe their sensations of transcendent ecstasy. The term ecstatic experience was used to define a range of possible experiences. For the participants, the occurrence of spontaneous sexual ecstasy was distinct from the experience of orgasm and took place outside the orgasm, so beyond it and afterwards when the energy of the orgasm settled. The 2 factors that consistently emerged from the narratives were a profound altered state of consciousness and an awareness of the connection and union with the lover, which indicates how an ecstatic connection with God through practices like dance, prayer, meditation, contemplation can lead to the union when the energy is directed devotionally towards God. Although each person's experience was unique, the features of the experience was assessed under the following headings: transcendence of spatial boundaries, transcendence of the boundaries of linear time, physical introversion and narrowing of consciousness, experiential extension beyond consensus, reality, and space-time, and transpersonal experience of a psychode nature. These designations clearly incorporate the dominant characteristics of transcendent awareness. A second study in 2002 conducted in-depth interviews with 10 participants who were all practicing Christians in long-term monogamous relationships. Participants were recruited through advertisements and by word of mouth, asking for those who had a profound experience of the presence of God in conjunction with sexual arousal and orgasm. The characteristics of these profound sexual encounters reported in the data of this study were organized under the following headings: euphoria, sense of wonder and amazement, emotional cleansing, intense union, intense physical arousal, transcendence, holistic involvement, sense of blessing and giftedness, sense of sacredness, and ineffable mystery. 2 additional features were described in distinctly Christian terminology. God's presence was evident, and there was a sense of blessing and giftedness by God. Then another study in 1986, which interviewed 8 practitioners who were initiated by a tantric teacher. All participants admitted to having a transcendent sexual experience as part of their practice. Neither drug use nor special foods were involved in the sexual practices. The purpose of this study was to verify the possibility of sensual experience leading to a displacement of the boundaries of the ego and to the emergence of profound modes of consciousness. Findings comparing the 3 conclude how in the theistic Christian experience, adoration, worship, and love were directed Godward. In the tantric practice, humans are taught they can embody the divine. It was asserted as a concluding remark how the essential nature of the Christian experience was more valid because of its theistic orientation and the presence of God. Also, that the Christian experience was more embodied and more holistic because it involved orgasm. A meaningful uniqueness in the Christian encounter was that it was experienced as intensely physically arousing. On the other hand, the ecstasy state experienced by tantric practitioners was non-orgasmic, and that the avoidance of orgasm opened additional channels of energy, and that orgasm ultimately became an impediment to a more transcendent ecstatic experience. While for some, orgasm seemed to bear no relationship to the transcendent event, being either a non-event or an impediment. In each case, the transcendent experience cried out for meaning, for a spiritual framework. So it seems that when a sexual experience goes beyond the boundaries of the ego, it needs to be integrated into a level of transpersonal understanding to give it meaning and context. Hence, the most important outcome is the final conclusion, which states that because sexual awakenings are such life-changing events and take us beyond the boundaries of the ego, and it disorientates who we thought we were, it requires a container through which we can direct the experience for integration and meaning. Therefore, it makes it easier if we have a religious connection or a deity we consider to be God or the goddess to interconnect that energy, which can also help us feel that we will find our place in the world again, and also deal with the shadow side of transcendent sex. The spontaneous occurrence of a transcendental experience, whether precipitated by sexual arousal or otherwise, can be a blissful and inspiring experience, but it can also be disturbing. Transcendent sex is not all sweetness and light. It has a shadow side that can be frightening, seductive, and dysfunctional. Altered states per se are not indicative of any higher or more evolved way of being, spiritual or otherwise. So being in an altered state during sex does not necessarily mean that something hallowed is going on, no matter how it feels. Just having a mystical experience does not guarantee that the experience will be well integrated. The radical shift of consciousness that occurs in a transcendent experience can have an upsetting and even destabilizing influence on the psyche. While the perils of transcendent sex can center either around the personal relationship with the sexual partner or the overwhelming intimacy that emerged in the experience, a study found that the pleasure brought about by the connection caused some to become addicted to the partner who was otherwise not a healthy or appropriate companion. Other cases involve sex with spiritual leaders that created an imbalanced relationship. The feeling of being out of control or of experiencing the intrusion of foreign material into the mind created disturbing responses in a few participants. Success on the tantric path most certainly requires initiation at the hand of a qualified teacher and many years of intensive personal practice. One whom will not manipulate you for their own sexual desires. Without guidance, proper initiation, and total commitment, practitioners risk their sanity and health. So in a previous podcast, I did mention about believing that by having a sexual relationship with a, so to speak, guru will awaken your kundalini. I said that will not happen, and I stand by that. This is something that takes years and years of self-practice and discipline, and it is strongly connected to grace. So no one can give it to you and no one can take it from you. Regarding having a vision of God through sexual relationships with another, I continue to have my doubts if this is actually possible. While sex and orgasm is considered an altered state of consciousness, to reach the utmost heights you have to go through the challenges of the path as well. So what is the possibility that you can do so with a partner who may not be facing the same challenges with you at the same time? And this wreaks havoc on your relationship. Being in a relationship also means looking outside yourself to keep the relationship healthy. What if you can't for a period of time because you need to reestablish psychological stability in your life? Or you want to spend more time by yourself to understand your experiences? All of these are questions I don't have the answers to, as my path was more solitary and renunciate. But I do feel that based on my experience, having a partner during such a time would pose a big challenge. As always, to have the ultimate, which is a vision of God or the goddess. So we'll continue this podcast looking at brahmacharya, that's the celibate path or the more renunciate path, in part 2. For now, thank you for listening, and please do subscribe at theologyofher.substack.com. How might your life have been different if there was a religion for you? A religion that affirmed you as a woman, as equal to man, and made in the image of God. How might your life have been different? Heretica, her eco-feminist theology educational podcast.